Welcome to Hush Hollow, where we tell long, slow stories to carry you gently down into sleep. My name is Edgar, and I'm glad you're here with me tonight. Wherever you are and whatever sort of day it has been, you don't need to carry any of it any further. You've arrived. This quiet hour belongs to you now. Before our story begins, I'd love to know where you're listening from. If you feel like it, leave a little note in the comments below. There's a gentle comfort in seeing this small gathering come together from every corner of the world, each of us under the same dark sky, each of us settling in to rest. And if these stories bring you some peace, you might think about subscribing, so there is always a warm light left on for you here, waiting on the next night you find you cannot sleep. Now, let yourself get comfortable. Settle into your bed or your favorite chair and pull something soft up around you. Let your shoulders come down from wherever the day has held them. Take one slow breath in and let it go slowly, and let the day loosen and drift away with it. There is nothing you need to do now. There is nowhere you need to be. Just let my voice go with you, quietly, into the story, and down into sleep. The rain had been falling since the middle of the afternoon, and by the time Iris turned the key in the door of the little bookshop at the end of the lane, the whole town had gone soft and silver with it. She stood a moment on the step, listening to the hush of it on the cobbles, to the small musical drip into the water butt beside the door. Then the old lock gave with a sound she would come to know well, a low and friendly clunk, and she stepped inside out of the wet. The dark of the shop closed around her, and it smelled of everything at once. Of old paper first, that dry, sweet dust of 1,000 books read and set down and taken up again. And under that of woodsmoke gone cold in the little iron stove, and under that, faintly, of beeswax and something green, some herb hung in a corner and long forgotten. She breathed it in and felt, without quite meaning to, the whole long day slide off her shoulders and settle on the floor behind her. She did not reach for the electric light. It seemed wrong for the hour, and she wanted to meet the place gently. She felt her way to the counter by the pale gray glow of the street lamp through the streaming glass, found the green-shaded lamp where the old bookseller had always kept it, and turned its little brass key. A soft gold light came up, falling in a warm circle over the counter and leaving the rest of the shop in a gentle, layered dark. The tall shelves rising into shadow, the narrow aisles running back and away, the 2 worn armchairs by the stove waiting just as they always had. And in the nearest of those chairs, curled into a marmalade knot with his nose tucked beneath his tail, the shop's old ginger cat lifted his head and regarded her without the slightest surprise. "Hello, Barnaby," she said softly, because the silence seemed to ask to be kept. "It's only me." The cat considered this, blinked once, slow and forgiving, and put his nose back beneath his tail. He had lived here far longer than she had, and plainly meant to sleep through this keeper's first night as he had slept through a great many other things. Iris was glad of him, of the small, living warmth of him there in the chair, as though the shop were only dozing and not truly empty at all. For the shop was hers now, the strange and enormous fact she had come to sit with, alone, through this one long rainy night. Old Mr. Merrow, who had kept it longer than anyone in the town could rightly say, had grown very old at last, and had gone quietly in the spring, the way a candle goes out when the wick has reached its end. And he had left the shop, to everyone's astonishment, and not least her own, to Iris. She had known him only a little, as a girl who had once spent whole Saturday afternoons folded into that very armchair with a book she could not afford, and which he had never once asked her to buy. Perhaps that had been enough. The keys had come to her in a plain brown envelope, with a single line in his careful hand. Look after it, and it will look after you. And she had not been able to think of one good reason to say no. So here she was. She had told herself she would spend this first night simply getting to know the place, learning where things lived and how the shop liked to be. She filled the little kettle and set it on the stove, fed a few pieces of split wood into the embers until they caught, and a small orange light bloomed behind the grate, and stood a while with her hands out to the warmth, listening to the rain and to the kettle beginning very slowly to think about singing. And it was only when she turned back toward the counter, a cup of tea warming both her hands, that she noticed the basket by the door. She knelt on the bare boards beside the basket and lifted the first book into the lamplight, a fat, green, cloth-bound novel, its spine gone pale and soft with handling, and she opened it to see whether a name was written inside, the way people sometimes did. And a small, dry thing slipped from between the pages and landed on the back of her hand. She held it up to the light. It was a violet, a single pressed violet, its petals gone to the color of old paper and thin as a moth's wing, flattened and kept and quite forgotten between one page and the next. Someone had put it there. Someone had walked in a garden on some long ago spring afternoon and picked this one small flower and pressed it into this book to keep. A bookmark, perhaps, or a keepsake, or only a way of holding on to a single fine day, and then had read on and finished, and months or years later posted the book back through the slot in the door with the violet still sleeping inside. Iris turned it over on her palm. She could not have said why it moved her so, this scrap of a flower belonging to a stranger she would never meet. Perhaps only that it had been meant to be found by no one, and here she was, finding it. She set it gently on the counter in the ring of lamplight, shelved the green novel, and reached for the next book. She told herself it was a chance thing. Books gathered such stuff, a leaf, a receipt, a hair. But the next book, a volume of sea stories bound in faded blue, gave up a bookmark too when she fanned it. A railway ticket, 3rd class, out to some seaside place 3 counties off, the date long rubbed away, the little card soft as cloth. She thought of whoever had carried this book on that journey, reading of the sea while the real sea came slowly nearer through the carriage window, and she set the ticket beside the violet, not quite knowing why she did. The third book had nothing, and the fourth, and she began to feel a little foolish, kneeling there at midnight over strangers' cast-offs. But the shop was warm now, the stove ticking as it heated, the rain steady and companionable on the glass, and Barnaby had come down from his chair to sit beside her, tail curled round his feet, watching her hands with the grave attention of a cat who has decided to supervise. And so she kept on, because there was nowhere else she needed to be, and because there is a quiet pleasure in a simple task done slowly, in a warm room, while the weather does its worst outside. By the time she had cleared the top of the basket, there stood 4 small things in a row on the counter: the violet, the railway ticket, a length of blue ribbon that had marked someone's place in a book of poems, and a single brown button, the kind that comes loose from a coat, tucked flat against the end paper of a gardening book. 4 small nothings, 4 little anchors dropped by 4 unknown hands. She looked at them, lined up in the lamplight, and felt the first faint stirring of a question she could not yet put into words. Then she lifted out a heavy book with a cracked leather spine, a cookery book, its pages swollen and soft with the work of 100 kitchens. And when she opened it, a card slipped out into her lap. Not a bookmark this time, a recipe, written by hand in a careful sloping script gone brown with the years, for a plum cake, and beneath the method a little note in the same hand. For Ada, who always said mine was better than hers. It never was. She was only being kind. She read it twice. It was such a small thing, a plum cake recipe, a gentle joke between 2 women, and yet it opened like a little window onto a whole friendship she would never see the rest of. 2 kitchens, 2 aprons, a rivalry so soft it was really only love, carried back and forth for years. Whoever had written it had tucked it into a cookery book and lent it out into the world, and now it had come home, and here it was in Iris's lap at 1 in the morning, still warm somehow, still kind. She set the card upright against the others. 5 now, and kneeling there, she understood, quite suddenly and quite certainly, that these were not the ordinary leavings of careless readers. A stray ticket, yes. A fallen leaf, of course. But a flower chosen and pressed. A recipe written out and kept. A ribbon, a button, saved against one particular page. These had been placed. These had been meant. Each one somebody's small, deliberate act of keeping. A little piece of a life folded into a book and set safely away, as though the shop were a place where you could leave such things and trust that they would be held. The question that had been stirring in her all evening finally found its words. Not why are these here, but who has been keeping them, and for how long? She got to her feet, her knees stiff from the boards, and carried the lamp behind the counter to look. Behind the counter, the shop kept its small domestic secrets. A stool worn shiny on the seat, a shelf of order books and dockets, a chipped enamel mug of paper clips, a caddy of tea. Iris set the lamp down and looked, and almost at once she found what some part of her had already known would be there. It was a drawer, a wide, shallow drawer in the underside of the counter, the kind that in most shops holds string and stamps and spare pencils. She drew it open, and it slid out heavy and smooth on its runners, and inside, laid in rows, in soft little compartments someone had made from folded card, were the tokens. Dozens of them, hundreds perhaps. A pressed rose gone brown as tea, a child's milk tooth in a twist of paper, a brass thimble, a photograph lying face down, a gray pigeon's feather, a paper boat carefully folded, soft at every crease, a postage stamp from a country that no longer went by that name, a knitted bootie no bigger than her thumb. Each thing lay in its own small place, and beside each, in a fine, faded hand, someone had inked the number. Iris stood very still and looked at the drawer for a long moment. The way you look at something you have wandered into that is older and larger than yourself. Then, on the shelf beneath, she found the book that explained it. A ledger, a real one, tall and narrow, bound in worn black cloth with its corners rubbed to gray. And when she lifted it down and opened it in the lamplight, she found it filled, page after page, with that same fine, faded hand. Mr. Marrow's hand, the careful, old-fashioned hand from the brown envelope. Look after it, and it will look after you. Each line was a small record, a number, and beside it a few quiet words. Number 114, a violet pressed in a book of poems. Number 115, a railway ticket, the seaside line in the blue sea stories. Number 116, a plum cake recipe in the big cookery book. Ada's friend, I think. And on, back through the pages and back through the years, for the dates in the margins ran a very long way indeed, a patient, unhurried catalog of every small thing a book had ever carried home to this shop, and of who, as near as he could tell, had left it there. He had kept them. That was the whole of it, and it took her breath a little to understand it. For years, for decades, by the look of the ledger, the old bookseller had been quietly gathering up the tokens that came home in the returned books, and instead of sweeping them into the bin as any sensible shopkeeper would, he had numbered each one and written down what it was and where it came from, and laid it gently in the drawer and kept it safe, against nothing in particular, against loss perhaps, against the simple sorrow of a loved thing thrown away. She looked back at the basket by the door with new eyes. The violet, the ticket, the recipe, the ribbon, the button, they were only the newest arrivals in a keeping that had been going on, unremarked, for the whole of her life and longer. The town had been posting its small treasures through that slot for generations, most of them surely by accident. A bookmark forgotten, a keepsake left behind, and one old man had been catching them all that while and holding them safe and telling no one at all. She wondered for a moment why he had never spoken of it, never put a sign in the window, never made a display of the drawer, never so much as mentioned it to a soul. And then she thought she understood. To speak of it would have been to make it a thing, a curiosity, a little museum of other people's feeling. But he had not wanted a museum. He had only wanted the things to be safe. The keeping was the whole of the point, and the keeping asked for no witness. It was enough that it was quietly, faithfully done. Among the newest returns, tipped out now across the counter, she found two more that made her throat go tight in the warm light. A child's crayon drawing, folded into quarters inside a battered picture book. A house, a sun with spokes, 3 stick figures holding hands, and along the bottom in enormous wobbling letters, U.S. And in a slim book of essays, in the margin beside some long forgotten paragraph, a line in soft pencil in an old and shaking hand. Yes, exactly this. I thought I was the only one. As though the reader had been speaking quietly to the writer across the years, and to whoever might come and read the same page next. Iris carried the ledger and the lamp to the armchair by the stove, and she sat down in it, the very chair where she had spent those long ago Saturdays, in the warmth and the firelight, with the rain on the glass and the cat now float up warm into her lap. She rested the ledger on the arm of the chair and opened it to its earliest pages. And she began, slowly, to follow the thread back toward its beginning. She began with the violet, because it was the one she had found first, and because a pressed flower seemed as good a door as any into a stranger's life. She turned back through the ledger, following the numbers down the years, for the newest violet she found was only the latest of many. Number 114 this past spring. But before it, number 89, another violet, 2 winters earlier, and number 61 before that, and back, a violet every year or so, all the way to an entry near the front of the book in slightly younger ink. Number 7, a violet, pressed in the gray book of poems. Mrs. Vane, I believe. She reads it every winter. Mrs. Vane. Iris said the name softly to herself, and the shop seemed to lean in to listen. Beside many of the violet entries, the old bookseller had added a line or two, the way a man does when he has time and a fondness for the people who come to him. And from these small notes, scattered across the years, a whole quiet life slowly assembled itself in the lamplight. The gray book of poems was still on the shelf. Iris rose and found it, a small dove-colored volume worn to suede at the spine, and she understood at once why a person might come back to it winter after winter. It fell open of its own accord to a poem near the middle, a short, plain poem about a garden under snow and the promise of the spring sleeping beneath it. And the page there was soft and pale with the touch of one particular thumb returning and returning over the years. She read the poem there in the lamplight, standing between the shelves with the rain at her back. It did not say anything clever. It only said that the garden was not dead but sleeping, that under the hard gray ground the roots were holding on, that the spring, though you could not see it or feel it or quite believe in it, was already on its slow way back. She could understand how a person who had lost a great deal might read those few plain lines every winter and be a little comforted and find she was able to go on. She held the small book a while and did not read any further. From Mr. Merrow's notes she pieced together the rest. Mrs. Eleanor Vane had first come to the shop a very long time ago, a young woman then, on the arm of a young man she had lately married. The gray book had been his, a gift to her, read aloud in the first winter of their marriage in a cold little house they were only beginning to make warm. And they had made a garden together, the two of them, over many years. Mr. Merrow had noted it in one entry. She speaks of the garden the way some speak of a child, and each spring, when the first violets came up along its wall, she would press one and carry it into the shop tucked inside the gray book she had borrowed to read through the winter, and leave it there, forgotten. Or perhaps not forgotten at all. The husband had died. Iris found the winter of it, marked gently and without a single unnecessary word. Mrs. V in today, alone now, would not take the book for nothing. I let her believe she was doing me the favor. And still the violets came, every spring after, a fresh one, pressed and left in the gray book of poems, as though each year she were bringing him one more flower from the garden they had made together, and trusting the shop to hold it safe, and going home a little lighter for the leaving of it. Iris sat with that a while. It seemed to her the gentlest arrangement she had ever heard of, that a grieving woman and a quiet bookseller had between them, and without ever once saying so aloud, worked out a way for love to have somewhere to go. She left her flowers. He kept them safe. Neither of them ever named the thing they were doing. And year on year the drawer grew a little fuller, and the weight of what had been lost grew, if not lighter, then easier to carry, because it was shared, even if only with a man behind a counter and a book upon a shelf. The newest violet, the one that had stood on the counter, number 114, had come home only this last spring, which meant that somewhere in the town tonight there was an old woman sleeping who would come again when winter closed in for the gray book. It meant the thread was not finished. It meant that it would be Iris now who kept it going, who would have the book waiting on the shelf and the drawer open for the next small flower, and a warm chair by the stove, and the good sense to let an old woman believe she was doing the shop a favor. She set the gray book back on its shelf, but at the very front where it would be easy to find, and she carried the newest violet very carefully from the counter to its numbered place in the drawer and laid it down so that it would be safe until the spring. Then she came back to the ledger and turned the page and found the next thread waiting. She meant only to follow one more thread and then perhaps to sleep a little in the chair. But one thread led to another, the way it does late at night with a good book, and soon she had given up all thought of sleeping. For the threads did not stay separate. That was the thing she began to see, turning the soft pages, matching the numbers to the little compartments in the drawer. The tokens were not a heap of unrelated keepsakes. They were a web. They touched. People who had never met, who had lived their whole lives a few streets apart and never once spoken, had passed the same books back and forth across the years, and left, each of them, a small piece of themselves inside, so that the drawer held not a crowd of strangers, but a kind of company, a slow conversation carried on through the shop by people who never knew they were speaking to one another at all. There was the ribbon, for one, the length of blue ribbon from the book of poems. She found its number and its note, and then several more beside it, and a small love story stood up out of the ledger like a paper flower opening in water. A young man had taken out a certain novel and, greatly daring, penciled a line in the margin beside a passage he admired. Nothing forward, only a thought. A young woman, borrowing the same book weeks later, had read his thought, disagreed with it, and written so just beneath. And he, borrowing it again, had answered. Back and forth the book had gone between them through the shop, a whole courtship conducted in the margins of somebody else's story, until Mr. Merrow's note read simply, "They came in together today, at last," and both went pink when I mentioned the book. And then, some pages on, the last of that little sequence, a wedding. She left the ribbon from her hair. I have kept it with the rest. There was the boy, too. She found him by the railway ticket, the seaside line. A boy called Tom by the notes, who had borrowed the same book of sea stories over and over through a whole childhood. A great salt-stained adventure of ships and islands and far harbors. He can't afford it, Mr. Merrow had written once, so I let him keep bringing it back. Someday he'll go. A boy in a small inland town, reading of a sea he had never seen, dreaming his way out along the tide. And then, years later, near the newest end of the ledger, the ticket itself, third class, out to the coast, and beside its number, 3 words that made Iris smile in the dark. He went, grown. And there were quieter threads, sadder and no less warm. A woman who had come in the week after some loss, unable quite to say what she wanted, and had gone home with a small book about the sea and grief and the turning of the year, and brought it back a month later with a single word pressed inside in her own hand. Thank you, and nothing more. A man who had left a photograph he could not bear to keep and could not bear to throw away, and so had done the only other thing there was to do with it, given it quietly to the shop, for the shop to hold. Each of them, in some hard hour, had found their way to this one warm room at the end of the lane, and set a little of the weight down, and the drawer had taken it up. And there was the drawing, the child's crayon house, the sun with its spokes, the 3 stick figures holding hands, and the enormous wobbling US along the bottom. She found its thread as well. A young mother had borrowed the same bright picture book night after night for years to read to a small child at bedtime until the child had learned every word by heart and then, one ordinary day, quietly outgrown it. The drawing had been the child's, made for the mother, and the mother had folded it into the book and brought them both home together, the book and all those years, and left the drawing behind where it would be safe. Someday, Iris thought, that child, grown tall, might come in looking for a book they could no longer quite remember, only the warmth of it, only being small and read to in the dark. And the shop would have it, and the drawing too, and give them back their bedtimes. Iris sat very still. Outside, the rain had eased to a whisper, and Barnaby had climbed onto the counter and folded himself into a loaf beside the lamp, watching her with half-closed eyes. And she understood now what the shop truly was and had always quietly been. It was not, in its heart, a place that sold books at all. The books were only the reason people came. The shop was a keeping place, a safe, warm, unremarkable little room where a whole town had been bringing its small tokens of love and loss and hope for longer than anyone could remember, trusting, without ever once putting it into words, that here, at least, the things that mattered would not be thrown away. And someone had to keep it. That was the shape of the thing. A keeping place is only a keeping place for as long as there is a keeper. It was very late now, or very early, that particular hour when the night is at its deepest and stillest, when the whole town is asleep and it feels as though you are the only soul awake, keeping watch over all of it. The stove had settled to a low red glow. Iris fed it one more piece of wood and it caught and crackled softly, and she sat back with the ledger and turned at last to the very back. She had left the back of the book until now without quite knowing why, perhaps because the front, with its earliest entries, had seemed the beginning, and one starts at beginnings. But the back was where Mr. Marrow had left the thing he most wanted found. Tucked into the final pages, folded once, was a single sheet of paper, and on it, in the same careful hand grown a little shakier with the years, a letter. It had no name at the top. It began simply, "To whoever keeps the shop after me." Iris read it slowly, twice in the lamplight, with the cat asleep beside her and the rain gone soft as breathing on the glass. "If you have found this," he had written, "then you have found the drawer and the ledger, and by now you will have guessed what they are. I will not explain what needs no explaining. I will only tell you how it came to me, so that you understand it is not a burden I am leaving you, but a gift, and the best one I have. I came to this shop as a boy. I will not trouble you with why, except to say that my home in those years was not a warm one, and this was the warmest place I knew. The man who kept the shop then, his name was Havistock, and he is in this ledger too, near the front, in a hand you will not know. Let me sit in the chair by the stove every afternoon and read, and never once asked me to leave, and never once asked me to buy. I had nothing to give him but an old library card with my name on it, which I no longer needed, being always here. I left it in a book one day, half hoping he would find it. He did. It is number 3. It is still in the drawer. I have kept my own small token there among all the others for 60 years, to remind me what the shop is for. So you see, he wrote, the keeper is only ever a keeper who stayed. Haverstock kept it, and before him others whose names are at the very front, and I kept it after him, and now you will keep it after me. That is all it has ever been, a warm room, a kind chair, and one person willing to hold on to what other people cannot bear to lose. Keep the drawer, add to it, write the little notes. The people like to be remembered, though they will never say so. Let the cold and the sad and the young come and sit by the stove and ask nothing of them. And one day, when your own time comes, leave this letter for the next. Look after it, and it will look after you. It looked after me. Iris lowered the letter to her lap. Her eyes had filled, though she was not sad. It was a fuller feeling than sadness, and a warmer one. She looked around the dim and quiet shop, at the shelves rising into the dark, at the green lamp and the red stove, at the open drawer with its rows of small, kept things, at the marmalade cat asleep and the rain whispering itself out on the glass. And she thought of a lonely boy in that same chair 60 years ago, warm for the first time, and of the old man he had become, keeping faith with a whole town's small treasures to the very end, and of how he had left it all, in the end, to a girl who had once sat in that same chair and been let alone and been glad of it. She set the letter aside and rose and went to the drawer and looked until she found it, number 3. A small card, yellowed and furred soft at the edges, its ink faded almost to nothing, but she tilted it to the lamp, and there it was, a boy's name in a boy's careful writing, A. Marrow. She held it a long moment, this little card that a frightened, hopeful boy had left in a book 60 years ago, half wanting to be found. And she thought of all the hands that had held it since, and of the old man who had kept it beside him all his life, to remember what the warmth had once cost him, and what it had been worth. Then she laid it back, very gently, in its place among the others where it belonged. And she found that there was nothing really to decide. There never had been. She was already the keeper. She had been the keeper, she thought, from the moment she turned the key in the door. All right, she said softly, to the shop, to Barnaby, to the old man who was not there. All right then, I'll keep it. And the shop, warm around her, seemed to settle the way an old house settles at night, as though it had been waiting a long while to hear those words, and now, having heard them, could rest. And so, in the deep quiet of the small hours, Iris began her keeping. She fetched the pin from the cup on the counter, Mr. Marrow's pin, a plain old thing with a good nib worn to the angle of his hand, and drew the stool up and opened the ledger to the first blank line after his last entry. For a moment she only looked at it, that one empty line, and above it all the full ones, running back through the years in his faithful hand. Then she dipped the pen, and in her own writing, a little unsteady with the size of the moment, she began. She went back to the basket first and finished it, for there were still books at the bottom she had not yet shelved, and where there were books there might be tokens, and every token now was hers to keep. She lifted them out one by one and fanned each gently and shelved it, and set aside the small things that slipped from between the pages to be numbered and recorded and laid in the drawer. There were not many left, but there were a few. A dried sprig of lavender, still faintly sweet from a book about gardens. A child's paper crown flattened from a book of fairy tales. A concert ticket, decades old, its print gone soft. A four-leaf clover, pressed and pale, tucked into a small book about luck and chance, as though someone had wanted to pass their good fortune on to whoever read it next. Iris took up each one, turned it in the lamplight, and gave it a number, the next and the next in the long sequence Mr. Merrow had begun, and wrote its line in the ledger and laid it in its place in the drawer. Safe. And she found, as she worked, that the work had a rhythm to it, and that the rhythm was a soothing one. Fan the book, shelve the book, and if something falls, catch it, and number it, and write it down, and lay it safely away. There was no hurry in it at all. There was no one to please, and nothing to prove, and nowhere on earth to be but here, in the warm, with the rain, and the low red stove, and the sleeping cat, and the green lamp making its small gold island on the counter. The night went on around her, deep and soft and dark, and she kept on within it, and the drawer grew by ones a little fuller. Somewhere in the town a church clock told the hour, very faint through the rain, and she did not even count the strokes. Time had loosened. The night no longer felt like a stretch of hours to be got through, but like a wide, calm room she could move about in as she pleased. Now and then she would pause over a book before she shelved it, one she had loved once, or one she had always meant to read, and stand a moment turning its pages in the lamplight before she set it home and reached for the next. Barnaby slept on beside the lamp, one paw across his nose. The rain drew its long, soft lines down the dark glass, and Iris worked on, unhurried, and was content. Not every token could be placed. Some of them Mr. Merrow himself had never traced. There were lines in the ledger here and there that read only "found," "no book," or came loose in the returns, "owner unknown." And among the last of the basket there were one or two such orphans of her own, a small brass key that fit no lock she knew, a photograph of a garden with no one in it and nothing written on the back. She could not say whose they were, or what they had meant, or to whom, but she found she did not need to. She numbered them like the rest, and beside each, in her own hand, she wrote the only true thing she could, "Not yet known." And she laid them too in the drawer, safe with all the others, because a thing need not be understood to be worth the keeping, and because someday, perhaps, a person might come in looking for a small lost key, and the shop would have it. And then, at last, the basket was empty. She turned it over and gave it a shake, and nothing more fell out. And she set it back in its place by the door beneath the slot, ready for whatever the town would post through it next. Every book was shelved. Every token was numbered, recorded, and safe. The ledger lay open with a fresh page begun in a new hand, and the drawer was fuller than it had been, and the whole shop was in order. Her order now, from the front door to the dark at the very back. She stood a moment in the middle of it all, the pen still in her hand, and looked at what she had done. And a deep and simple satisfaction settled over her, the kind that comes only from a small task carried out with care for its own sake, for no reward but the quiet knowledge of having done it well. She thought that Mr. Marrow, wherever he had gone, would not have said anything at all. He would only have nodded once and gone to put the kettle on. When the work was done, Iris did not go to sleep, though the hour and the warmth and the long day all pressed gently on her too. She was not tired in the way that wants a bed. She was full of the shop and the night and the hundreds of small kept things, and she wanted, before the night was over, to sit a while with the whole of it and understand where she now stood. So she carried the ledger back to the armchair by the stove, and she turned to the very front, to the oldest pages, and she read the shop backwards, down the years, all the way to its beginning. Mr. Marrow's hand went back a long way, page after page of it, 60 years and more. But before his, she found, she had not noticed it at first, so alike were the two in their care, the hand changed. The letters grew a little rounder, the ink a little browner, the paper softer and more freckled with age. This, she understood, was Havistock, the man who had let a cold and hopeful boy sit by his stove and read, and never once asked him to leave. His own entries ran back further still, decades of them in that rounder hand, a whole keeping before the keeping she had known. And before Havistock, at the very front, in the first few brittle leaves, the hand changed again, older, more formal, the spelling strange in places, the ink gone almost to gold with the years. She could not make out the name, but she could read the tokens well enough. A lock of hair, a soldier's brass button, a wedding ring returned, with a line beside it she had to hold close to the lamp to read. The line beside the ring, when she made it out, was not a sad one. It read, in that oldest golden ink, returned by her own wish that it be kept where it was chosen. She would not have it buried, nor sold, nor worn by another, only kept. Iris did not know the story, and never would, but she knew that 100 years ago and more, a woman had wanted this one small circle of gold to stay in the warm, in the place where some happiness of hers had begun, and that a bookseller long dead had promised her it would, and had kept the promise and passed it on, so that the promise was being kept still, tonight, by a woman who had not yet been born when it was made. It was the oldest kindness in the drawer, and it was going on yet. The shop was old, far older than she had ever dreamed. It had been keeping the town's small treasures not for years but for lifetimes, keeper handing on to keeper, hand to hand, all the way back to some first bookseller, long turned to dust now, who had found the first forgotten thing in the first returned book and had simply not been able to throw it away. Iris sat back in the chair with the ledger open on her knees and its whole warm weight against her, and she let herself feel it fully. All these people, all these years, every violet and ribbon and button and boat, every recipe and drawing and pressed and faded flower, the small, ordinary, priceless leavings of a whole town's whole long life of loving and losing and carrying on. And this one little room at the end of the lane had held them. Through wars and winters, through all the changes that had swept the wide world beyond the streaming glass, the shop had gone quietly on being exactly what it was, a warm, safe, unremarkable ark into which the town had been placing, one by one, the small things it could not bear to lose, trusting that here, at least, they would ride out the years. And now the ark was hers to steer. The thought did not frighten her. It steadied her, the way a great and worthy task will steady a person who has been waiting, without ever quite knowing it, to be given one. She thought of the town out there in the dark, street upon street of it, every window black and every soul asleep, and of how many of them, without ever knowing it, had a small piece of themselves here in this room, safe in the drawer, waiting. And she felt, for the first time in a long while, that she belonged somewhere entirely. Not to the town exactly, to the keeping of it. After a time she rose and went back to the counter and took up Mr. Merrow's pen once more. She turned again to the fresh page and to the lines she had already written there that night in her still new hand. The lavender, the paper crown, the clover, the small lost key. And beneath them she left one blank line, and then, in the space below it, she wrote something that was not a token at all. She wrote the date, and beside it, simply, Iris, keeper, after Merrow, after Havistock, after all of them. I will look after it. She looked at the words a while, at her own name taking its place at the foot of that long column of faithful hands, the newest link in something very old and very kind. Then she blotted the ink, closed the ledger, and set it back on the shelf beneath the counter above the drawer where the next keeper, some day long from now, would find it and read it and understand. By now the rain had almost stopped. Iris noticed it the way you notice a sound only once it is nearly gone. The long hush against the glass had thinned to a few last drops falling from the eaves, slow and far apart, and beyond them the town lay in a deep and dripping quiet. And at the very bottom edge of the window, where the black glass met the frame, There was the faintest lightning now, the first thin gray of the morning, still an hour or more away, but coming. She stood at the window a moment and looked out at the empty lane, silvered and washed clean, the cobbles shining, not a soul stirring. And she thought, her first night was nearly over. She had come as a stranger to a shop she had inherited and did not understand, and she would leave it when the morning came as its keeper. Somewhere between the turning of the key and the graying of the glass, the shop had become hers, and she had become the shop's. There was one more thing she wanted to do before she rested. In the window, in a long wooden box that Mr. Marrow must have tended for years, a few late flowers were still blooming, leaning toward the glass, and among them, deep purple in the lamplight, a single iris. Her own flower, her namesake. She had been named for exactly this, her mother had always said, for the small, brave flower that comes up in the cold and does not seem to mind it. She reached into the box and picked the iris gently and carried it back to the counter. She pressed it there in the lamplight, the way all the others had been pressed, laid flat and careful between two clean sheets of paper under the heavy cookery book to flatten and dry and keep. And while it began its long, quiet pressing, she chose a book for it. Not just any book, but a good one, a warm one, a book she had loved as the girl in the chair, that she thought some other person someday might need. And she promised herself that when the iris was dry, in a week, in a month, she would tuck it inside that book and shelve the book out on the floor with all the others, unmarked and unremarkable, and waiting, so that someday a stranger would buy it or borrow it and carry it home and open it one quiet evening, and a small pressed iris would fall out into their hand, a little gift from a keeper they had never met, a sign that someone once had sat here in the warm and thought of them kindly before they were even known. And perhaps they would keep it, and perhaps one day they would bring it home. And then it was time to let the shop sleep. She banked the stove down low, raking the embers gently together so they would hold their warmth till morning, and the red glow behind the grate dimmed to a soft and drowsy ember light. She gathered up the last of her tea things. Barnaby had not moved from the counter. He lay curled beside the lamp, deep in the boneless sleep of a cat who is precisely where he wishes to be, and she rested one hand on his warm side a moment and felt him breathing and did not wake him. She turned the little brass key of the green shaded lamp and lowered its light and lowered it again until the shop filled slowly up with a soft and gentle dark. The shelves in the aisles, the sleeping cat, the drawer holding a whole town's small kept treasures, all of it dim and warm and safe. Outside, the last drop fell from the eaves. Inside, The stove breathed its low red breath, and Iris settled at last into the armchair by the fire and let her own eyes close, warm and content, in the keeping place that was hers now to keep. And that is where we will leave her, the new keeper of the night bookshop, asleep in her chair by the last of the fire, with the rain gone and the morning coming softly, and everything safely kept. There is nothing left tonight that needs looking after. Whatever small thing you have been carrying, you can set it down now, here in the warm, and trust that it will keep safe until morning. Let your breathing go slow and deep. Let the bed hold you the way the old chair holds Iris. Let the dark be soft and kind. If your thoughts are still moving, let them move slower now and slower, the way the rain slowed, from a rush to a patter to a single falling drop and then to nothing at all. You don't have to follow them anywhere. You can simply lie here in the quiet and let each breath carry you a little further down, past the day, past the noise of it, past everything you meant to do and did not do, down and down into the warm dark where the only thing asked of you is to rest. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with me. My name is Edgar, and it has been good to keep you company tonight. Rest now. You are safe and you are warm, and you are exactly where you need to be. Sleep well.